Hey everyone, I'm Susan Birch, and welcome to another Health Detective podcast. Today, it's a real pleasure to be talking with Vince Warnock from Wellington, New Zealand. It's crazy. I only found out about Vince from a mutual colleague in the US about a week ago.
Yeah.
So it's wonderful to have him as a guest.
It's so surreal when somebody introduces you to someone else and you realize we actually don't live that far from each other, sort of. Yeah.
I know, it was crazy. And it was so good to have a Kiwi voice on the other end.
Yeah.
So, the reason for the Health Detective podcast is to help people find strategies that support them in taking the best care of themselves on their journey to the life that they want.
Nice.
And today, Vince, I think we're going to learn a lot from you because you've got an incredible track record of success in your life. You're a multiple best-selling author. You have a podcast that's ranked in the top podcasts worldwide, Chasing the Insights. You're a marketing guru and an entrepreneur. But life didn't really start out that way for you, did it?
No, not at all. It's funny, though, even when you said that about the successes, when you're listing them out, I know those successes because they're my life, but I still, often you focus more on your failures than your successes. So I look at that and just go, oh man, you're building me up to be this incredibly successful. And then I realize, oh wait, I am very successful. It takes me a while. But no, look, I grew up in a very impoverished part of New Zealand. And when I grew up, I grew up in a very poor family. They weren't my birth parents at all. I was kind of fostered into the family. And it was also a very abusive environment. And so I grew up in a neighborhood surrounded by gangs, surrounded by violence, and I had violence at home as well. And when you got 5 sisters and a brother growing up in this kind of unsafe environment, it does a lot for your confidence, as in it destroys it. And it also doesn't give you any kind of exemplar or any kind of example of success or of things that you could hope for or wish for or aim for at least. So that was kind of what I grew up with and kind of dealt with that through most of my childhood until I left home at around, I think 16. I think I left home and got out of there as soon as I possibly could, just to get safe. But yeah.
So can you tell, so what happened after you left home? Like what was your adolescence? What was your early young manhood?
Well, I before that, I'll actually give you one more thing, which was around about 11. So even though I was still at home, we in New Zealand, we have, our schools are named a little bit differently from how they are in the US and things. Obviously, we have primary school and secondary school, and then we have, college, which is what Americans call high school. But we have this intermediate school, which is for 2 years when you're 11 and 12. And it's like a transitional school between primary and secondary, primary and college. And that was a very pivotal year for me for a number of reasons. One, because it was the first time I became an entrepreneur. I started my first business when I was 11, discovered I could make money, which was an incredible feeling because that gave me freedom and gave me opportunity. But the other thing that I had was an incredibly inspirational teacher and somebody who genuinely changed my life because, like I said, I didn't grow up in an environment where I had any kind of role models, any kind of one that I could look up to, anyone that I could think that's what I want to be like. But then all of a sudden I had this teacher that made me feel this weird feeling on the inside, Susan. He made me feel like I had hope and he made me feel like someone believed in me. And I'm like, what? This is just so foreign. I don't know what's going on here. But it genuinely put me on a different trajectory because it taught me 2 things. Number one, I don't have to be defined by my past, right? He taught me very clearly that I could craft and carve my own future. But the other thing that it taught me is that I really want other people to feel what I felt. I want other people to feel that sense of empowerment, to feel that sense of hope, to feel that sense of I can do whatever I put my mind to. So that was that kind of pivotal point at age 11. Now, fast forward through college, I was an incredibly bored student. I hated college. I hated high school, as they call it in the US. I hated that because I was a bit of an outcast. I always felt like I never belonged. I'm an ADHD child, very intelligent, and a little bit nerdy and weird. And I just didn't fit in anywhere I seemed to go. So I was always one of these misfits. In fact, I almost don't like admitting this, Susan, but genuinely, like people joke about this, but this was genuine with me. I thought for at least a couple of years that I was secretly an alien, and that somehow this alien race were going to come down and go, oh, there you are, Vince. We misplaced you on this planet. Now we're taking you back to our planet. And by the way, you're destined to save the galaxy. As you can tell, I was hugely influenced by Star Wars. So that was kind of my journey going through there. So coming out of college or high school, I worked for a year and got into a slump. And that was because all of a sudden I got into a rut. I didn't have ambition. I didn't have anything to look forward to. I just was making money, and I spent that money on alcohol and comic books because that was my life. And it wasn't until a good friend of mine, actually, we probably shouldn't admit this, but he forged my signature and he applied for me to get into CIT, which was Central Institute of Technology. So it's kind of like our version of MIT, I guess. So he forged my signature to get me into there, and gave him my credentials and all this kind of thing, told them my grades and all that, and it kind of garnered that off me over a period of a while. He kept coming over to my place and he would like checking out all my certificates, and I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, nothing, but he's getting all that information so he could apply on my behalf because he knew that I was in this rut. And all of a sudden I get accepted into CIT, and it started my kind of next phase of the journey. But I always knew, no matter what I was doing, whether I was doing electronics engineering, which I was training for, whether I was in my first job, whatever I was doing, I knew at that point that I wanted more than that, right? And that had kind of given me a new hope, and given me a new kind of angle on life. And I knew I wanted now to not be beholden to somebody that I'm working for, because I felt like what that was like when I was in that rut. I felt like what it was like when you didn't have any control. So I wanted to now shift that. So that began my entrepreneurial journey. I was always creating things on the side. No matter what job I had, I was always building a business here, building a business there. The early ones of those failed miserably, by the way, which that was a minefield to kind of walk through. But then I started learning more and more and more, and starting to gain successes from that. So that was that kind of pivotal area. But the main thing was I always felt out of place. And I always felt like, in fact, imposter syndrome played a big part in this. I still remember, actually, here's a good example. I remember going to, I won tickets to this business breakfast. And when you're a poor student, right, and you suddenly have tickets to go to this thing with free food and free coffee. And by the way, he was one of the top executives at Adobe. So you're going to hear from someone that's genuinely inspirational. I was like, oh my goodness, I'm totally going. Now, here's the thing. I knew this was going to be a formal kind of affair, like a formal breakfast. And back then, this is in the days when everyone wore, suit and ties to these kind of things. I didn't own a suit and tie. I had to go down to what we call an op shop, so like a Goodwill. I went down to that and found the only suit I could afford, which was $10. And it was this, it was disgusting. It was like a shiny gray double-breasted suit that didn't fit me at all. Like the sleeves went right down to my almost down to my fingernails. And this was the suit that I got. And I had to learn how to tie a tie. So I got someone to pre-tie it for me. And I had this red tie with a silver suit almost. And I turned up to this event. And I was like, right, I'm going to enjoy every bit of food here. I'm going to enjoy all the free coffee. I'm going to learn everything I can. And I walked into the room and almost ran away, because I looked around, and in my mind, and I don't know what the reality was, this is just my mind's interpretation of that. In my mind, every single person in that room was dressed in Armani suits. They're all like, super wealthy, they just looked like they had their lives sorted. And here I was, this misfit standing there in this ill-fitting suit. And by the way, to make it worse, my hairstyle back then was a mullet, which meant I had really long hair at the back and really short at the top. I did not look the part at all. But I went to this thing and I sat down at this table, and I felt like such an outsider. I felt like everyone was looking down their nose at me. They probably weren't, but that's how I felt. So I got my free food, got my drink and all this, and I'm listening to this guy, and he was genuinely inspirational. And I remember it was a really pivotal point for me, because at the end of that, I was taking down every note I could. I wanted to learn from this guy. And at the end, he came around each of the tables and asked him if anyone had any questions. And I remember seeing him coming. He's a couple of tables away. And in my mind, I'm having this conversation with myself going, okay, Vince, come on, man. You've got this one shot now to ask something intelligent, right? One shot. All you need to do is ask something intelligent, and everyone in this room will realize that you belong here. And then I suddenly realized he's standing right next to me, and he goes, so have you got any questions? And before my brain could even engage properly, my mouth just came out with, yeah, at what point did you know that you had made it? And I could hear my brain just go, dude, seriously, that's all you came up with? Oh, you're lame. And my brain just wanted to check out. And I looked around the room. I swear everyone was kind of rolling their eyes, chuckling themselves like, dumb question. And this guy stunned me because he turned around and he said, "Oh, that's a really good question, Vince." And I almost went, "Is it?" And he goes, "I'm going to let you in on a little secret." He goes, "I'm going to let you in on my morning routine." Now, I had heard at this point, by the way, that morning routines were really important. It was kind of in the 80s and things. So everyone in the 80s, thought that if you had a really solid morning routine like Warren Buffett or any of these kind of guys, then you would be successful. So I was like, right, I'm going to write down every single thing he tells me. So grab my pen and grab my paper. And I'm like, yeah, I'm listening. And he said, okay, every morning I wake up deliberately early. And I'm like, oh, deliberately. Okay, so I write that down. And he goes, I get out of bed and I'm like, yep. He goes, I go to the bathroom. I'm thinking, oh, not the kitchen, not the office. Goes to the bathroom. Right, write that down. He goes, I fill up the water with fill up the sink with cold water. And I'm like, right. And I was going to ask him what temperature water, but I thought, no, cold water is enough. So I write down cold water. And he said, then I splash that water on my face. I look in the mirror and I go, ha, today's the day they realize you're a fraud. And I went, what? And he goes, I've never felt like I made it, Vince. I've never felt like I belong and never felt like I deserve any of the success that I have. He said, that's just what I deal with. He goes, but then I remind myself of what I've accomplished and remind myself about what I've contributed, and I move on from that. And then he did something really interesting. He looked around the table and he says, all of us deal with that. And the moment he did that, I realized the people on the table were nodding. And all of a sudden, that insecurity, that self-doubt, that imposter syndrome, we didn't have a name for it back then, but that imposter syndrome that I was feeling, I realized was an equalizer. Because everyone in that table felt the same way as me, which made me realize I've got as much right to be here as everybody else. Because if they feel like imposters and they feel like frauds, and here I am feeling the same thing, then that's normal and I'm okay. So it was a really pivotal moment for me. Now, it didn't cure me of any imposter syndrome. Obviously, I still had to deal with that the rest of my life, but it was just that really important point in my life in those early years.
That's a beautiful story. And, it's a really great segue into my next question when I get it properly formulated. I'm just pondering on that because we all have imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And I think imposter syndrome holds a lot of us back. And I know, when we talked last week, and what did you tell me? I don't think you said it was imposter syndrome, but I was, procrastinating on something.
Oh, yeah, you're definitely procrastinating. Yeah.
and the self-doubt or the feeling that you're not going to be good enough.
Yeah.
But, when we come from really tough backgrounds, and even when we don't come from tough backgrounds, but, lots of us have had life experiences that really do make us doubt ourselves. Now, you had insights at 11 that were probably quite amazing for an 11-year-old.
Yeah.
But, how do we get into that? Our limbic system is in overload. Yep. Our amygdala is firing all the time. We're seeing the gremlins everywhere we turn around. Oh, yeah. We make these promises to ourselves that even in our own head, we know we're never, ever going to keep.
Yeah.
How do we, what tools do you use? How do you deal?
Oh, my goodness. Look, I wish I had all the answers, but I can tell you what I do. And there's a few things for me. One of them is understanding imposter syndrome. So this is what I had to do. And I still remember, I think I shared with you when we were talking, Susan, but I had the huge honor of being recognized by Adobe as one of the top 50 marketers in the world. And even technically, my son keeps reminding me, top 25, Dad, because they only had actually chosen the first 25 of that. But I'm standing on stage with all of my heroes in the industry. And I'm looking at all these people going, I've read every single book of these people. I know exactly, I've consumed so much of their content and they wouldn't even know who I am. Mm-hmm. And I felt like such a fraud. And then to make it worse, at that conference, I was a keynote at the conference, all of them were keynotes. They had a professor there who was doing a study on imposter syndrome. So I thought, well, this is going to be useful because at some point, because I knew I dealt with this. So at some point I want to write a book on this. So I thought I'm going to go to this session. I'm going to grab every stat and every piece of information from her research. I'm going to pick this apart and I'm going to use this for my book. It's going to be amazing. And she sat there and she talked about, this is the type of people that were more inclined towards imposter syndrome. And other than the only thing that I couldn't tick the box on was the fact I'm not a woman, I'm a man, because women are more inclined towards it. But everything else in there, first gener, so the first in my family to, accomplish anything, to build their own business, all that kind of stuff. I'm in the tech space, which is just so fast moving. It really does lean itself more towards that. In marketing, and particularly digital marketing, again, even more so. So all of these things kind of tick the boxes. And then I was like, this is really good information. And then she goes, and here's how we sabotage ourselves. And the moment she started giving this laundry list of sabotage, and procrastination, funny enough, is one of those, the moment she started giving us all these reasons and these ways that we sabotage ourselves, it was incredibly confronting. Insanely confronting, and so much so I was actually really emotional at the end of that session, and I really wanted to go to the session afterwards, but I couldn't do it. I just had to go around the corner out of the conference hall. I found a Starbucks, sat in the corner of the Starbucks, felt really sorry for the poor young girl that was working there, because she comes over and I'm sitting there and she goes, are you okay? And I'm like writing all these notes. I got tears streaming down my face going, I'm fine, I'm just reevaluating my life. I'm like, and she goes, would you like a coffee? Yes, please. But what it was it made me realize how many times I sabotaged my career, my businesses, and things like that. And it made me even look at some of the early businesses I'd done, Susan, and realize the reason some of these ones failed was nothing to do with the economy, was nothing to do with the market, nothing to do with, whether it was the right product or anything. It was to do with the fact that I sabotaged myself. And I did that because I was afraid. I was afraid of being exposed as this imposter. So that put me on a weird journey where I had to understand what imposter syndrome was. And when I understood that it was actually just your brain trying to keep you safe, then I had to look into, what is it keeping you safe from? And it was keeping you safe from the fact that you're outside of your comfort zone. And that's when I realized, wait a minute, if this is just a signal from our brain telling us we're outside of our comfort zone, then that's exactly where we're supposed to be. Like as entrepreneurs, as business owners, creators, founders, whatever you call yourself, that's exactly where you should be, because that's where breakthrough happens. That's where growth happens. That's where prosperity happens. That's where all the fun stuff happens. So in essence, when imposter syndrome is screaming at me, telling me I'm not worthy and telling me I don't deserve this accolade, or I don't, I shouldn't put that thing out there because people will judge me, then it's actually my brain going, hey, guess what, Vince? You're exactly where you need to be. So that was a huge thing for me, a huge tool that I had to learn, was to understand imposter syndrome. But then I had to actually help myself to get out of that kind of immediate moment. And I created a thing called the impact list, which I totally stole the idea from David Goggins with his cookie jar method. But I created my impact list. So I just wrote down a list of everybody that I impact, and not just work related or personal related things. So I've got on there a list of any client that I've had. I put down their name, I put down what their challenge was, how I helped them, and what the outcome was. And then I put my neighbor who dislocated their hip. And I went out there one morning and realized they hadn't put their bins out, and it was raining, it was slippery. And I thought, well, I don't want them to have any injury. So I put the bins out for them. Didn't think anything of it until a few days later, where they hobbled over to my house to thank me. And I'm like, oh, wow, I impacted that person. I made quite an impact on them. So I wrote that on my list. And I use that impact list for a reason. Anytime I'm hitting the wall, anytime I wake up and I go, I can't do this today. Like I'm not, I feel like a fraud, or imposter syndrome screaming at me, or self-doubt, or whatever. Any of those times that we all face as entrepreneurs, where you get up and go, I wish today would go away and I want to reset the day. I go to that impact list, and I do it for a few reasons. Number one, it reconnects me with my why. It tells me why I keep doing what I'm doing. When you look at all these people that you've helped, and all these people that you've, particularly with the work that I do, I help a lot of entrepreneurs become prosperous. I help them to generate leads, help them position themselves as thought leaders. So anytime they've got an accomplishment, I write that down in there. And I look at that and I go, that's why I do what I do. But the other thing that it does is it gives me perspective. Because often, like I look at it this way, if you think of how our eyes work, right? When I'm feeling like I'm not worthy, when I'm feeling imposter syndrome, when I'm feeling all the self-doubt, when I'm feeling all the feels, that's me looking inward. So I'm focused on myself. I'm focused on this tiny bubble of my feelings at that moment. But the moment I look at that impact list, now my focus shifts from me to somebody else. And when I'm looking at them, if you know how our eyes work, if you're focused on that, you can't focus on two things at the same time, which means all those feelings, all that imposter syndrome is now in my periphery, which means I'm not focused on it. It has less impact on me. So that to me is the main reason I did that. But then there was a third reason that happened, which is, or that kind of came about from that, And that was the fact that every time I look at those people, I realize if I don't show up today, if I just give in and have that bad day, then I'm denying somebody else potentially the breakthrough that these people have. And I kind of don't have a right to do that because that's not fair. It's not about me. It's about other people. So that impact list is something that I use quite regularly. It's my tool. I used to put them as Post-it notes on my wall, Susan, till I realized I sometimes have clients come over to my office. And so it looks a bit weird with this giant wall of how awesome I am. So they're all looking at me going, narcissist, maybe? No. So now I just put it in a Trello board and I just go back to it whenever I need to. So those are some of the main things I do. But the other one is I hold myself to account. I surround myself with people that can lift me up. And it's really easy to we've all heard the saying that you're the sum total of the people you spend, the 5 people you spend the most amount of time with. It is true. So you've got to be careful if you're surrounding yourself with negative people, with naysayers, or people that are constantly, we call them feet on the ground. I'm a pie in the sky kind of person. And then you have the feet on the ground people, and they're the realists. They're the people that go, hey, this doesn't, this won't work, or this will be too tricky, or this will be an obstacle. I go, nah, screw the obstacles. I'm going to keep my head in the clouds. I'm going to stay up here and I'm going to look at where we're heading. Because guess what? If you keep doing that, you're going to get there eventually. So I surround myself with people like that can lift me up, that can encourage me. I've got a group of people around me that now know me so well that honestly, it's a little bit spooky sometimes, Susan. I'll be sitting there and I'll just feel this like intense emotion, or I'll just feel this, oh man, I don't know if I can do this. Next thing you know, I've got like 5 messages from them going, hey, what's going on? You okay? And I'm like, oh, damn it. They're so in tune with me. They know when I'm feeling bad now. But it's really important. It's really important to have that network around you. So yeah, so that's the tools I use.
And do you have a morning program? I think David Goggins is very big on the accountability mirror, isn't he?
Yeah, he is.
And you look at your strengths, but you also look at the challenges, and you analyze them, and you go, what could I have done different? What could I have done better?
Well, I look at it a little bit different, mainly because I'll go back to an example I had one of my previous startups. So we were growing so quickly, and we had 4 co-founders. There was myself and 3 others. And I flew up to Auckland. I had 9 meetings in a day with different prospective clients up there. And New Zealand was a tiny market for us. Honestly, our biggest markets were Australia and the US. But I was like, right, we're going to do this. We're an early stage startup. I'm flying up there. I'm going to stay at a backpackers. By the way, don't ever stay at a backpackers when you're on a business trip. It was disgusting in there. I felt so good. I had to go to a gym just to go to the shower and feel like I was clean again. So I go to these 9 meetings in the day, and I'm just on the go, nonstop. Because 6 of those 9 clients, 9 prospective clients, converted to a paid trial. So I'm now buzzing. I'm like, this is awesome. I'm also exhausted. So I'm heading to the airport to fly back to Wellington, and I jump on a call with my co-founders. And I'm like, guys, I just want you to know 6 of them have converted to paid trials. So I'll send through the details tomorrow. This is fantastic. And one of the co-founders, who's very feet on the ground, turned around and said, this is awesome, Vince, but here's what I want you to do. While you're on the plane, he said, why don't you sit down and think about, first of all, how can I turn those 9 appointments into 15? And I'm like, well, first of all, you can't, you moron, because you'd have to clone me. But I'm sitting there going, bite my tongue. And then he goes, and the other thing is, I want you to look at those 3 that you didn't convert and think, what did I do wrong? And I'm like, that's really presumptuous, that the reason that these didn't convert was something to do with me. In actual fact, the reason they didn't convert is we didn't have a product that suited them. They're a very different type of accounting firm. So the way what I realized then is that's the kind of stuff that crushes my optimism and my soul. So I look at it a different way. I do that morning routine. I do daily affirmations. I do gratitude work in the morning. It's super important to me. But the other thing I do is I look in the mirror, I do the David Goggins thing, but I go, right, what are my strengths? What am I damn good at? But then what successes have I had from the previous day? But then I go, and also what have I learned from the day? And those are the things that weren't successes. So anytime someone doesn't convert, what did I learn from this experience? What is it that taught me or told me about myself, or what I can do even better next time?
I like it. I have a, what do I need to learn in my, I call it my morning resets.
Yeah. I was going to say, if I did a what do I need to learn, that'll take up most of my day.
Well, I think you just pick 1 or 2 things that you focus on, whether it's communicating better in a relationship that you're in. I mean, it can be about anything, whether it's, learning to take some time out when you need to.
Yeah.
All those things, recognizing when you're getting burned out, recognizing when the stress is piling in and you're going to start making really poor decisions for your health.
I was going to say, I think all of those are on my list of things I need to learn. Yeah.
Anyway, there's lots of different ways of doing it, but you're really interested in how our mind works and things. Talk about why writing things down is so important.
Oh my goodness, so many different reasons. I genuinely think you engage a different part of your brain. I don't actually know the science behind this part, Susan, to be honest, but I've found for me that whenever I write things down, it's almost like it's solidified. Rather than just saying it out loud, rather than just thinking in my head, which if my thoughts go 1,000 miles an hour, like they're just all over the show, but actually writing them down actually structures that thinking, structures it. And it's this really cathartic process. Like you're actually structuring your thinking, which by the way is super useful for us. This is why I encourage every entrepreneur to write a book, because if you write a book, you have to learn how to articulate what it is you're teaching people or what it is you're helping people with, because otherwise your book's not going to make sense. So it's a really good way of kind of understanding what you're actually, what your strengths are and what you're actually trying to teach people. But the other thing is it's insanely cathartic. And it's a really kind of interesting process where it feels like you're letting go of a lot of this stuff. I do this at night. It's not really creative writing or writing as such, but at night I will do my brain dump list, which is where I just go, okay, what have I got to do in the next couple of days? And I'll just dump everything down onto a bit of paper. And then I'll sort that into, okay, what of this is urgent, what of this is important, and put it into a grid. And a bunch of that I'll just leave until a later date because it wasn't as urgent as I thought. But by doing that, what I've discovered is that helps me go to sleep, because by writing all these things down, I'm taking them out of my head, putting them down on paper, and my brain goes, okay, well, I don't really need to think about that right now. I don't need to try and remember that because you've got it written down. So that's why writing is so important to me. And also, I'm completely, utterly biased. I've written multiple books. I love being an author. I love writing, and I even have a publishing company. So again, I'm completely biased here. I want everyone in the world to tell their stories. So, yeah.
I think that writing helps with rewiring our brain, though, rewiring those neural circuits. And, so any opportunity we have to get out of that limbic system and get into that prefrontal cortex and start rewiring those circuits.
Yeah.
So how do you take care of yourself? Like health-wise, how do you take care of your nutrition, your exercise, your sleep?
Yeah, I was going to say poorly, but that's not fair. I'm ADHD, quite severely ADHD. So I have that as an additional challenge. Now, I am aware that just about every entrepreneur seems to be ADHD. It is kind of comes with the territory. But that does mean that there are some very severe downsides to that. So one of those is the hyperfocus aspect. And I learned very early on, like I remember I would get up at 2:00 in the morning, and about 4:00 in the afternoon, I'd go to get up, and I'd suddenly realize, why do I feel so gross? Like, why do I feel so sick? And why is my stomach hurting? And I'm like, oh, it's not my stomach. It's, oh, I haven't been to the bathroom all day. I haven't eaten all day. I haven't even had a glass of water all day. That's not healthy. So I had to learn that, as embarrassing as it is to say, I suck at adulting. I suck at looking after myself. So I had to put in place a whole pile of practices to make sure I get good at it. So part of that was automation in my house. Honestly, my computer here talks to me all the time. So it knows when I'm on a podcast, so that's good. It won't interrupt us. But otherwise, I'll be sitting, in fact, I can guarantee as soon as I finish this meeting, it'll go, hey, Vince. And I'll say, yeah. And it'll go, should you be having a break right now? And I'm like, yes, I'm having a break, for goodness sake. Stop hounding me. Well, it's good for you. Okay, fine. I'll go and have a break. So that's really important. But I also know that surrounding myself with good people who can call me on my health is really important as well. And I've hired an accountability coach, and their entire job is not to make sure I'm doing the right things. It's to make sure I'm actually looking after myself. And they realize very early on, by the way, that's why they're very good value, because they realize very early on that when I'm writing, that's my happy place, which means if I'm not writing, I'm probably overdoing it. Right. So if I don't discipline myself to write every day, that's the biggest sign to them that actually, Vince, you probably are doing too much. And then they have a direct line to my wife, and they'll call my wife. And then my wife goes, "So we need to talk." And I'm like, "Ah, damn it, I'm being found out again." So I kind of force myself to look after myself. But the way I do that is diet's really important to me. I am a comfort eater. And also I work from home, so easy access to the fridge. So I make sure I pre-prepare healthy snacks. I pre-prepare things that I know are good for me. So that way, if I'm nibbling during the day or I'm munching on things during the day, I know it's going to be good for my health. But the other thing I try and do is I schedule regular walks with an entrepreneur friend of mine who lives basically about 10 minutes away from here. So we schedule walks, and we go on walks during the day to make sure that we're actually getting out, getting some fresh air, getting some sunshine on my skin, making sure I'm not just locking myself in the room all day. And then the other two things I do, Susan, I almost hate to admit this, but my neighbors will attest to this because they all think I'm crazy. One of the things I do is if I'm stressed or I'm anxious, I'll go outside. I don't even care if it's raining. I'll go outside and I lay down on the grass, and I just lay there and I feel the grass and I feel the rain, or I feel the sunshine, or I feel the wind. And I just kind of get basically be present in the moment. Yeah. And it has a huge effect on when I'm overwhelmed. It really does reduce that. And then the other thing I do is I come back inside, I grab my toy lightsaber over there, I go outside, and I imagine I'm a Jedi, and I have the most amount of fun. And my neighbors think I'm weird and I'm warped, and they're probably right, but I don't care. In my mind, I'm a 7-year-old again, going to see Star Wars on the big screen, and I'm now a Jedi Knight, and I'm defending the galaxy. It is so much fun.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah. And that's wonderful. And it's so good that you've found what works for you, what suits your personality. Do you have any thoughts about, because we're all different.
Yeah.
You're obviously very high energy, very bright, very articulate, but, we're talking to lots of different types of people.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts for people who might struggle a bit more, with the comfort eating? Any suggestions with the
I would highly recommend you do the deep work, and this isn't easy. So I have one of my co-founders on one of my projects, one very good friend of mine, in fact my best friend. She is an EFT and tapping therapist, so she does a lot of work in that area, and we schedule regular time to do the deep work on that, to actually understand why I'm comfort eating, or why I'm behaving the way that I am, or so to actually going through, get counseling essentially is what I'm saying to you all. It really does work. Honestly, talk to a therapist, talk to someone, understand what's behind these behaviors. If you can't curb them yourself, and I'm very bad at curbing them myself, then make sure you put in place things to help you, but also make sure you actually talk to someone about what might be behind all these things. And I'll give you an example. This isn't really around a bad behavior as such, but I had a phobia. And I think I told you, Susan, but I had this phobia of tissues. And it sounds so random, right? Seriously, I mean, it's just a tissue. And I'm not talking a dirty tissue. I'm just talking if someone had a scrunched up tissue, a clean one, in their pocket, and I know this because I always lent my jacket to my wife when we were out. She would put the tissues in the pocket. I put the jacket back on, put my hand in the pocket, feel the tissues, and immediately I would break out in a sweat. My heart would start racing, and I felt like I was going to pass out. And that doesn't make any sense. Now, I know phobia literally means irrational fear, so obviously it's not a rational thing anyway, but I don't understand where that came from, because I've never been abused by a tissue before. No tissues ever beat me up or anything. I'm like, what's going on here? So by doing the deep work, we actually unlocked some stuff that I had hidden away that I didn't even remember. And it was all tied to my brother. So my brother was born with cerebral palsy, born with water on the brain, born with a whole pile of conditions. He passed away when he was 3.5. But for those 3.5 years, they were amazing. He's just such a wonderful, wonderful child. He was so full of life. Now, he couldn't talk, but we had this weird telepathic bond, I'd tell you. I'd look at him, he'd look at me, we both crack up laughing. We just knew. And it was such a special bond. But part of his illness meant that because my parents were always absent, they were always out wherever partying or out on their own, I had to look after him. And that meant that I had to break up all the mucus in his lungs because he couldn't do that himself. So I had to massage him and, do chopping on his chest and his back to break that up. And then I had to get a pile of tissues, and I just sit there, and it sounds disgusting, but honestly, when it's someone you love, you don't even care. You don't even think twice about this. I would suck the mucus out of his nose into the tissue and put it away. And that kept him alive. So when he passed away, and he passed away in my hands at the hospital at age 3.5, my brain immediately went, well, I can't deal with that. That's completely overwhelming. So my brain locked all those negative health issues into a little box inside my brain, locked it, and then swallowed the key. And all I remember was the happy times with my brother, which sounds awesome. But the problem with that is tied to that was this anxiety and this fear that I didn't even know where it came from around these tissues. So doing the deep work with my co-founder, we unlocked that, opened it up. I suddenly remembered all the stuff that I had to do with his health and everything. And look, I'll be honest, I cried for like 3.5 hours. And the next day I cried even a little bit more. But it immediately took away the power that phobia had over me. And I no longer, I'd like, seriously, I can pick up tissues now. I have no problem with them at all. It was actually quite miraculous in that sense. But that comes from understanding why we do the things and we behave the way that we do. You just need to do that deep work. It really is worth it. It's hard. It's very hard. But on the other side of that is so much freedom and so much, like, life is so much better when you actually do the work on that deep stuff.
No, that's a powerful story. And I'm going to be chatting with a EFT practitioner in a couple of weeks,
Awesome.
Which will be wonderful because
yeah.
Because from my perspective with health and with, I'm really focused on energy production, how our mitochondria is working, what our cells are doing. And, we all know that environmental toxins and things are dangerous and damaging to our cells and mitochondria. But our thoughts, fear triggers, cortisol, that whole, kind of adrenal response. We churn through our nutrients and our minerals a lot more. But the other thing is our mitochondria goes from producing energy to being in battleship defensive mode. And it literally shuts down. And it's a well-recognized medical problem. It's, cell danger response has been well documented. And, doing some work like you suggest to help release that. So your mitochondria and your cells and your body can actually start to get back to normal functioning, I think.
Absolutely. And I think most people listening to this are probably immediately, as you describe that as well, they're like, yeah, I've felt that before. I know what that feels like because it drains the energy from you. And I realize too, because you have no idea. Like often we think we're fine, and I'm a high accomplished and high achiever. I only sleep 4 hours a night, which I know sounds terrible, but that is actually a mutated gene. So like that is quite normal for me. And I'm honestly, I've had it checked. I'm okay. So nobody come at me and say you should get more sleep, Vince. I literally can't sleep more than 4 hours a night. But as a result of all that, you get your sleep, all these kind of things, and that you don't realize that a lot of the things that you've gone through in life actually trigger that fear response. Like, for example, like PTSD, work in the corporate world, corporate is, well, I'm going to say it, corporate is toxic. I've yet to find a large corporate that doesn't have at least some level of toxicity, which causes, issues for you as a human being. And I find myself triggered by different situations and triggered by things. In fact, even down to, I left on good terms with my previous corporate. I left, on the height of my career going, hey, I just don't want to do this anymore. I'm really unfulfilled. I want to do this thing where I'm helping entrepreneurs. And leaving there, I thought, right, that's all fine. I don't have any baggage related to that whatsoever. And then I walked past the old building where I used to have my office and felt my stomach tense up. And I'm like, what's going on? Why do I feel this like knot in my stomach? And I realized I was feeling the pressure that I was under when I was there because we had so many deadlines. We had so many things we were trying to juggle and everything. And I had PTSD as a result of it. So unless you do the deep work, you're never going to get to the bottom of that, which means you're constantly going to be triggered by these things without knowing it, which puts that fear response. And as you said, that just drains the energy from us,
Yeah. And, personal relationships can do that as well when they're not, not very healthy. And, you hear someone's voice or steps on the driveway or something. And, you get that,
I get it. I get it, Susan, when someone says my name is Vincent. I'm not Vincent. It may be my birth name. I don't care. I'm Vince. And nobody calls me that because that name usually meant I was about to get a beating. And it usually meant that I'm going to get pain. So anytime someone uses that term, I'm like, it just causes tension.
Really interesting. Well, do you have any last thoughts to share with people? Yeah.
Yeah, look, the last thing was probably one of the most important lessons I had to learn in life. And it came from, just to give you the background, one of my first companies failing. And I had set up this company. It was like, honestly, the opportunity was there. It was real, like, it was something I was really proud of. It was a mobile game. So basically it pitted Android users against iPhone users, against probably the 3 people in the world that had Windows Mobile at the time. But it was this awesome game where you play like in this Top Trump style environment, and you would battle off against, if you were Android, you battle off against iPhone people. And it was in the height of the iPhone versus Android kind of launch, So I could see how this could work. I could see South by Southwest, everyone in the news would be talking about, oh my goodness, San Francisco is now for iPhone and Las Vegas just been taken over by Android. I could see all the headlines of these kind of things. I knew that this was going to be huge, but I had missed a couple of core things in doing the research around this. And that was more around the fact that Apple don't like to be compared to anybody. So anytime I tried to do this, they shut it down. Anytime we try to get sponsors, they shut it down. And that to me was terrible. And I was feeling really sorry for myself. And I was having a big pity party. And I'm like, man, if I had known that stuff, I wouldn't have wasted all this time. And oh, I'm such a loser and blah, 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 the negative self-talk that we do. And I was having this pity party next to a friend of mine. And I was just saying to them, it's not fair, man. Like all these other people have families where they grew up, where they have people that can teach them things like this. Or they have mentors and people that can inspire them and tell them all this kind of stuff. I don't. I came from nothing. And I could tell he was getting really irate with me because he's like, oh my goodness, Vincent, this pity party. So he turned around and he said something that actually did change my life. He said, look, do you realize, Vince, that everything you go through counts for something? And I went, I didn't know what he meant. So I asked him and he said, look, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And he said, and let's face it, the ugly that you've had to deal with in your life, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. But it helped to make you into who you are today. And he said, and I happen to think you're an awesome human being. And that's when I realized that no matter what we go through, whether it's good, bad, or ugly, it shapes you into who you are now. And the fact is, I think genuinely every single person on this planet has so much potential and so much goodness in them. So you should be proud of that. And I had to learn to not, throwing the pity party and not going, poor, poor me, and actually go, you know what I went through sucked. But it taught me empathy. It taught me how to be there for other people. It taught me how to understand why people behave the way that they do. And that, by the way, turned out to be a really useful skill in marketing. This is why, I study neuromarketing and why I'm really, really good at it, because I know what it's like on the other side. So that's my advice to everyone, is to understand that your story matters. What you've been through matters, but it also made you into who you are now. And you are awesome, genuinely.
I think that's a great message to finish on. So can you tell us where to find your books, where to find your podcast?
Sure. Oh, I make it really difficult for everyone, Susan. No, I'm joking. I make it really simple. You just need to go to chasingtheinsights.com. That is the home of my podcast. It's the home of my books as well. My new book came out a couple of weeks ago. And it's where you also find where you can connect with me. And I highly encourage you to connect with me everywhere. Unless you're a spammer. I don't like spammers connecting with me, but everyone else, you're more than welcome. I love meeting new people.
Fantastic. So I encourage everybody to, get in touch if they've got something they want to have a chat to you about. I know you offer a free,
strategy call. Yeah. Free strategy. If you need any direction with marketing, reach out and I can help you with that. Yeah.
Fantastic. Cool. All right. Hey, thanks. It's been awesome talking to you today.
Thanks, Susan. It's always a pleasure.